Here's a question I think doesn't get enough attention, or maybe the answer has changed a little bit in recent years. And that is, can you get to the executive level without a college degree? And my guest today did just that. And it's a pretty impressive journey. He's now VP at a publicly traded tech company running infrastructure for millions of devices. He started his career in desktop support, but to me, that's not the most interesting part. He's also got a lot to say about FinOps, how it's changing, as well as how to leverage AI in the space. I'm Steven. This is Tech Pod Talks. And today I've got Chris Robertson. He's the Vice President of Cloud Operations and IT at Arlo Technologies. Chris, welcome to Tech Pod Talks.
No, it's awesome to be here. Yeah. I guess my path is not maybe the most traditional way to a VP level role here in the Valley, but it can be done. A little bumpy at times, but yeah, different paths exist. And so, no, but I'm very excited to be here. Good to see you again.
Yeah, thanks, man. Likewise. So I'm definitely going to ask you about that, but let me give you a bit of an intro first. So you're the VP of Cloud Ops and IT at Arlo, smart home security company. From what I can tell and what you've shared, seems like you guys are on a tear lately. 330 million in ARR, a bunch of new partnership announcements recently, Samsung, ADT, Comcast. Stock seems to be doing pretty well. But we've actually known each other for a handful of years. I think across 3 companies. You can correct me if I'm wrong. You were the Senior Director of Platform Engineering at Zscaler. Before that, Head of Cloud Ops at Life360, where you guys processed billions and billions of data points every single day. And you've done all this. And the thing that maybe we start with is without going down the traditional path, you started in desktop support. So again, welcome. Glad you're here. And if you're all right, let's get into it.
Yeah, well, happy to dive in and any of those and all of those things. And maybe somebody will find something useful out of my meanderings here.
I'm confident they will. So let's talk about career journey. So started in the support department, didn't take the traditional college route. Take me back to those early days. What was the moment you realized that maybe you didn't need the traditional credentials and you could go further than conventional wisdom would tell you?
Yeah, so I think there's a disconnect between learning and degrees. And so I went to college. I've gone to 4 different colleges at various points in time, including after my first child was born, I was going to school at night, and always been a lifelong learner. But I'm actually not a terribly good student. And so pretty early in my professional career, like I think 20, I realized that I much preferred getting paid for doing this IT thing than paying someone so that I could go sit in a computer lab doing IT like things. And so so that was kind of the genesis of it. I have been involved in computers my entire life. I was programming the first time when I was 8 on old Apple IIes. So it's doesn't happen without a lot of work. First job of my career was contracting for desktop support. And very, very entry level type role, doing hard drive installation on Windows 95 rollouts.
How big were those hard drives? Do you remember?
I don't. I would guess 80 megs.
Yeah, I was going to say 40, 80. Yeah, probably ballpark.
Seagates. I don't know. Yeah, something like that. Interestingly enough, though, we were installing the hard drives because previously those computers had all booted off of Novell file servers. And so they had a full remote desktop environment. Like you might think it was like a Citrix now or, something like that. That this, I think I don't know if they still exist, this petrochemical engineering firm down in LA that did piping for, oil refineries. That's how all of their engineers' workstations booted. They had Windows 3.1 running from a Novell file server All of the configuration management that feels very cutting edge at this point, and maybe still will do everywhere, was actually built in by default. And so that was actually a very, very interesting place to kind of start my IT career, because I had no idea how unique that was in 97, 98, something like that.
Yeah, you said something a minute ago, which I want to kind of build on is you, you got what was, I think, admittedly, an entry level job, but had the hunger, desire to learn, teach yourself. What were some of the things you had to learn or teach yourself or grasp that maybe you would have gotten on the traditional degree path, but didn't?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm almost entirely self-taught, right, professionally. And so, if you look at the books over there, it's management books, Harvard Business Review, various things like that. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff that I had to go learn on my own. But I think it's really just everything and nothing are both kind of true. There's one of the things that I have found self-taught people, myself included, we tend to be relatively deep, but then you have gaps. So you'll go dive into something and you'll really go much deeper than you might get in a traditional college education. But then you won't cover everything. Maybe you're not interested in it. Maybe you didn't have any reason. Maybe you flat out didn't know that you didn't know that area. And so a lot of, professionally, what I had to learn was understanding where I had gaps. It's not really a technical thing, but it's just realizing, yeah, as much as I started desktop support, that I was in networking pretty fast after that. So great. I know a lot of, pretty technical networking stuff. But then I actually had to go, I was probably in my mid 20s when I figured out what the canonical textbook was for network engineering and started to understand some of the larger concepts behind it. And so I'd done BGP routing before I'd read anything out of TCP Illustrated, which is, like the canonical book back in the day, for this stuff.
You like giving yourself a migraine is what I heard there. BGP routing. That's hardcore.
Yeah, it's fun. And that's what I'm talking about, like that willingness to go deep. So I think in my 20s I had moderately not ISP level complexity, but from an enterprise standpoint, very complex, BGP setups. Um, but I did not know like datagrams versus frames versus all this other kind of stuff that you would cover in a classic network engineering course. That was all stuff I was catching up on. And so it's uneven, as I think really kind of the way to think about that. The lifelong learning is kind of the core of it. I also didn't expect to know everything coming out of school. I expected to always be learning. And that I think is probably the biggest skill coming out of it that's actually been, hugely empowering, for my career.
Yeah, I love it. Parents love to give advice, and one of the things I always heard from my dad was be a lifelong learner and school and educate, and kind of take on the attitude that you've had throughout your career. Now that I'm a little older, I look back and yeah, he was right about that. That was pretty good advice. I'm sure there was some bad advice at the time, but that one definitely stuck with me. I'm really dying to ask you about some more domain specific things, but let's just pause there for a sec because I mentioned a little bit about your career arc, TuneIn, Life 360, Zscaler, Arlo now. What I've seen and tracked, and based on what I know about you, each role was a little bit more progressive, more complex, broader, certainly more seniority. Talk a little bit about your decision making around when it's time to make a move, when you wanted to try and take a step up, and then what was the through line though between those different companies and roles?
Yeah. So the number one thing that I look for, when I'm looking at a role, and this is kind of my career trajectory as well. So is there a need at the company that I think I can have a high leverage impact against. Because at the end of the day, I just want to solve problems. And so is it a physical data center? Is it a cloud deployment? Don't care. Those are just hammers. You figure it out. Is it a consumer tech, enterprise tech? Kind of don't care. They have different patterns behind them, but you'll figure it out as you kind of go through all of these things. And so I am good at complicated technical domains. I am good at, shall we say, chaotic environments. And so most of the last 15 years has been companies at a time of transition. And so tune in. Ops, back end guy number one, just been funded by Sequoia. Yeah, trying to figure out how to move out of this like totally hokey original setup in a data center in Dallas. We've already got millions of users and trying to get like 7 POPs around the globe in AWS and an ad network and no downtime because it's a direct to consumer type thing. Life 360 again. I think I was the 6th manager that one of my directs had in 4 years when I started.
Wow.
So just a lot of chaos there, and okay, let's get some stability there. Let's get that building. Zscaler, a little bit different, but like, hey, how do we get these? I was actually like figuring out how to go build the back end of data centers. Was Zscaler. So almost as far from like a traditional AWS deployment as you might think. And then Arlo, coming in here, and it's how do we scale this team? How do we grow that? And yeah, a lot of luck. Met a lot of good people along the way that have kind of given me some opportunities. But that's really, let's go find a problem. Let's go do some good things and get the team to go pull together on whatever that North Star is that you're working towards, which obviously changes by company.
That's a good tee up because I want to ask you about problems. So I know you're pretty passionate about FinOps, but also have what I think is a bit of a contrarian view on it or a non-traditional view. And so you and I have talked about that, we've worked together and that's been one of the areas. And I know that you don't think of FinOps strictly as a cost recovery center. You seem to ascribe more value to it, maybe company enablement function, really. So don't let me put words in your mouth, but maybe you can unpack that a little bit. Like, what does that mean in practice?
So I kind of stumbled into the whole FinOps domain about, I guess, 5 or 6 years ago now at Life 360. I've always been drawn to optimizations of how the tools work. And so all the way back to, so I was part of the original team for Backblaze designing their hardware storage solution and looking at the physical layouts of servers and the connections to hard drives to do this very low cost storage system. And that was like 20 some odd years ago, at this point. And what I found is that FinOps it's a thing, but the bigger thing about it is it's actually a measure of your efficiency. And that is the thing I really focus on. I actually want to spend as much money in AWS as I can figure out how to spend. Because if I'm spending an absolute boatload of money there, I'm getting an absolute boatload of value coming back. But I don't want to spend money when I'm not getting any value coming back. And that's the real core of it. And so when you can look at it as an efficiency play, all of a sudden it is not, you're not trying to manage a cost center. You're not trying to pretzel people into bad architectural decisions to get a cost target to hit or these other ratios or anything like that. You're understanding your actual customer metrics. You're understanding your unit economics, and you are mapping your back end across a couple of those dimensions. And that is where it gets really powerful, because if you can code your product team and you can say, that feature you wanted to roll out to 20%, what if I can get that price down by 50% for you? And now you can roll it out to 50% of the user base. What's that going to do for our attach rate? What's that going to do for our growth rates? We Life 360, this is all relatively public, but we completely changed the unit economics there, and that allowed so much flexibility for the organization, because tens of millions of dollars in costs were not hanging over the company. Or early in that journey, here at Arlo, but already some pretty significant, wins in that direction as well. And so, yeah, that's kind of the direction, that I look at this. So it's not yes, we're going to try to save money, but more importantly, we're going to make sure that every dollar that we're spending is getting as close to a dollar value as possible. So that's, I think, maybe the contrarian thing there, because I don't go against particular ratios or anything else. It's just always drive the efficiency.
Sure. I'd love the example about being able to fund new features, make them more widely accessible, their business value, all over that. I've seen you run these cost efficiency initiatives and then use that to fund lots of different things. Can you give us some other examples of things you've been able to do or fund by cutting waste out of the system?
So maybe two really relevant ones today, right? Or in the larger today sense. So one, we've actually used to save headcount historically, right? By not having the overhead in AWS that was directly responsible for not having to cut as many people when we had financial downturns. Right. And that is just an incredible empowerment and impact for both those people, but also the organization, because you're not losing the capacity and the capability. And then the other one, AI tooling, right? If I'm not spending it on an idle AWS instance, that's some number of tokens that the engineering team or the product teams or marketing or finance or somebody else in the org can make better use of to empower themselves. And so, as with most companies right now, we are looking at some pretty significant budget shifts, as we look at these various tooling. And I am a huge proponent. I think they're very useful. They're not free. Money's not infinite. And so, yeah, we can shift from A to B, and use also the nice virtuous loop to kind of go look at these tools, free up a little bit of money, use the tools, free up some other money on other optimizations. And at the end of the day, we have a system that is more efficient. So our base costs have improved. We have generally speaking, if you have a more efficient system, it's probably faster as well. You just pulled out some latency or various things. So that means your customers are actually getting a better experience out of it. It's generally cleaner. And so, because you've done the maintenance and you've done the housekeeping, you tend to have fewer failures. Customers also like it when features work.
I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, I paid you some money and I actually want to get, the feature I paid for. And then at the end of the day, you're also able to then go do something else with those funds. Maybe it's AI, it's Claude, it's OpenAI, it's whatever, that is. Maybe it's a product feature, maybe it's people, that is much higher organizational impact. At the risk of Mr. Jeff Bezos not being able to launch quite as many rockets based on Amazon revenue. So,
Well, I'm definitely going to come back and ask you more about AI because I'm pretty interested. But before we do that, let's talk about platform and reliability. So I know you've worked across a few companies where You've had, I think, what you've called journeys to improve those things, uptime and service availability. Do you have a playbook when you walk into a new place? Like, what are you looking for? How do you assess where you're at and build a plan around it?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of key things. So if you want to do a journey from some small number of nines to some larger number of nines in terms of reliability, there's a couple of really key things you have to start with before you can figure out if that journey is possible. So one, do you have organizational agreement on the goal? That sounds maybe silly, maybe obvious, but it's actually not. Do you have your marketing or product teams willing to wait for features so that you can fix the reliability issue? Do you have agreement on your exec staff on if you're a 2 nines, a 3 nines, or a 7 nines environment? Do you have an understanding of your customer SLAs? Like all of these types of things, take that, which you think would be a simple answer, and make it actually pretty nuanced. And that's actually been typically the biggest hurdle. Do you have the agreement? Do you have people actually willing to change behaviors in order to do that? To not just give it lip service, but actually make meaningful changes. So that's probably 40 to 50% of the problem. Once you have that, the next big thing you need is a way to describe the reliability or whatever the improvement is that you're trying to make. And what I mean by describe is, do you have a vocabulary? Do you have a set of metrics? Do you have a shared understanding of where you are currently and what it is that needs to actually specifically change? And the most common example is maybe some red metrics, in the ops world, SRE world, but it's not necessarily that. It could be a unit economics or release times or various other things. But can you specifically describe it? And not only that, can the team also specifically describe it? So that when you say, a striped man-eating predator, everybody thinks tiger in the jungle and not tiger shark in the Australian beaches. Very similar, and yet worlds apart in how, the context that various people will take into the decision making that they're doing. So then let's say you've understood what your goals are, you can describe it, and then the question: can you break the work down into small, repeatable improvements? It is not about big wins. Durable changes have to be small and they have to be repeatable by many people. And so, do you have an understanding not only of where you're going, but those small tasks that are going to happen every release, every Tuesday, every PR cycle, that you're actually changing the fundamental work patterns to shift into whatever that new paradigm is that you want? And then this maybe sound a little paradoxical, but then do you have the people to actually implement those? Do you have people who can grok all of that and say, I get what you're saying, I'm bought in, I'm going to do this, I'm going to champion this 10%, that 10%, and then stitch that together. And that pretty high level, because all the details change on every company. But if you can get all of that there, you've got a really, really, really good chance of whatever your business metric is that you're trying to move on the technical side, shifting. And if they start falling down, you're going to backslide pretty quickly.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I really like what you said about chasing small incremental wins over big giant things all at once. That's certainly something we believe is true and we try to do, especially for the building the momentum in the organization around that. Sometimes if you can show a small little win, it makes getting alignment and buying and all those things a lot easier.
Yeah, and it actually, like, I'm sure you guys have seen this. Is if you come in and you might deliver something, and it's this big bang, and everybody goes, "Oh, this is amazing," right? And then next Monday, the next amazing thing has come in, and they're already like, it's almost out of sight, out of mind, as opposed to like, nope, every single time, uh, and just kind of getting that shift for people. But yeah,
Yeah, 100% with you on that one. Okay, so I want to come back to AI. I
yeah,
said I would. And this could be 10 episodes, and there's podcasts just dedicated to it, obviously. Let me start by kind of stepping back from the technology for a minute. One of the things we see is people getting hung up. Where do we start? What do we invest in? How do we pick the things that are going to have positive ROI? So if VP of platform engineering came to you and said, Chris, I got to figure out my AI strategy. Give me some advice. Well, what would you tell them? How do you think about that?
what is it? A journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. And that is actually the most important thing to do, which is do anything. Don't let yourself, search for the best answer. Just find an answer, take the win, and keep moving. And so that's the first thing I've told many people, actually, similar questions, for it. And then this one is maybe a little counterintuitive. Find where your team is excited next. There's opportunity in so many different areas. Like maybe you've got a big corporate objective or something like that, in which case you might need to guide people a little bit. But if you don't, let the team's excitement drive the adoption to a large degree. That will let you move a lot faster with a lot less friction, and you'll get some of that groundswell. And even if that's only for 3 to 6 months to get things moving, and then you prune it back and you start aiming at a little bit more. I think that's the big one. And then I guess kind of similar to the reliability thing I was just saying, look for the small wins. Look for the wins, ship it to production. Don't ship a POC. It doesn't have to be perfect. Let it just get a win, get it out there. And I think the other thing I would say right now is expect to change whatever your tool stack is once a year. Whatever you pick, change it once a year. We are on tool stack 3 at Arlo in the last 12 months.
And you're talking about AI tools, or is that a broader statement?
Yeah, and the AI tools particularly. I think it's I'm a proponent of build for 6 to 18 months and just plan to rip it out. If you get longer than that, amazing. But plan for things to be obsoleted in that time frame. But I don't think it's even that long right now on the AI tools. As I said, Arlo, we're on our third coding stack pattern that we've been rolling out to the team, and literally, actually, not even 12 months, right? More like 8, as we just iterate through things. And this, the foundational tools that we're using.
Yeah, I love that one. Stuff's moving extremely fast, as we know. So I like the honest approach to that, and just acknowledging what is probably going to happen or needs to be true.
Yeah, and I think if you tell the team that up front, you're always going to have some people who are waiting to be told the tool chain to go use. But if you can tell them this is the tool chain for today, here's the patterns that may not change, but the tool that we're implementing it in likely will. You can get a little bit of the fear, the discombobulation, and manage that a little bit better on a larger rollout.
Let me go a step further around, or step past strategy rather, since you talked about just getting started. I call it hacking. Find something to hack on. That's the best way to learn. Given that you've worked at a handful of companies that are different sizes, different stages, I think you've got a cool perspective on this, even if it all wasn't AI related. What do you think separates the companies that are actually getting value from AI versus, and there's a lot of them, the ones that are just buying licenses and hoping for the best?
Yeah, I think clarity of intent. So, are you buying the license because you read it in VentureBeat, or did you have a problem and a vision that you're looking for a solution, and you've benchmarked three different tools, and you're picking the one that you works best for your environment, your team, your time, for that? I think that is really probably the biggest difference that I've seen. I think do we get? I think we get that mostly right. I think we actually internally have a long ways to go on that. We're still learning what our intent is, and so we actually do thrash a fair amount. I'm not going to come here and say like we've got this all buttoned up, but we see a lot of companies that are doing it better than us. It's okay. We're going to chase the best version of ourselves as we go through this for our definitions of success. But I think really having that definition of success is the big thing. And then investing in the team is the other one. If you roll out these tools and you haven't given people patterns to follow, likely not going to have a ton of success. And that's not an AI tool problem. That's an any tool problem.
Right.
And so that's the thing I think people kind of ignore, is that a lot of the problems that you see with AI tools are the same problem you see with any other tool. They're just happening at 5 to 10x the speed, so they feel very, very different. Rolling out tools is hard. Training people on tools is hard. If you ignore that, you're not going to get a good result. And that's not true that's not any different, I should say, of an AI tool if you're using Claude Code, Cursor, or Microsoft Office back in the day. And figuring out all of that for the team, that's the really critical thing. And it's actually something we have been doing and getting a lot of really high leverage out of, which is making time for the teams, training, hackathon projects. And so not only we're going to show you the tool, we're going to show you how to use the tool, and then you're going to have a project that is time constrained, but a project that you are sharing with the wider world internally, that you have built in the space of 5, 10, 15 hours. And that has been really, really, really successful for us. Am I going to say that should work for everybody? I don't know. I will say it's worked really well for us. It's something I think people should really consider doing. But that's, if you go on medical devices, they'll, very different world, but they'll say like, hey, here's the new whatever. Pretend you have a patient there. I'll train you on it and then go run through how to actually use it. Same basic pattern. If applied a little bit differently.
I'm imagining you would agree with this, but a lot of tech problems are actually people problems, not the individual, but process and workflows and so on. So yeah, what you said about that totally resonates. Let me ask the controversial question, because I'm curious for your take. There was some polling this week. We'll throw it in the show notes. I forget who did it, but it was a poll on Americans' feeling about a whole bunch of different topics, and AI ranked lower in terms of like enthusiasm around it than ICE in the US. But yeah, clearly there's a lot of fear around AI. I think the number, I think it was 57% of Americans have a negative or unsure opinion about AI. So What's your take? Is AI a threat to people that are a little bit younger than us and growing their career right now, or do you think it really creates a different kind of opportunity?
I think both are true. I think, and that is, I think, probably the biggest cognitive dissonance for it. It is both a job creator and a job destroyer. And I use a couple of examples when I talk about this with folks. So, like, one, if you went back, I'll say 100 years, ballpark, and you were working as a machinist, you could have a very good career as a very highly skilled lathe or mill operator. Those jobs are gone by and large, right? Those are all now CNC, whatnot. But the ability of the people who made the shift to a CNC, computer controlled operating thing is incredibly empowering for those people. And the number of different types of things that get built, order of magnitude, I would expect larger. And I think that's one way to look at it. I think the other way to look at it is from a purely computer science, computer engineering, software engineering standpoint. I wrote assembly code in college. I think I've probably got a book hiding back here that I could go pull back out. And if I had to go figure out how to write assembly again, I could. But I haven't touched assembly code in, I don't know, 25 plus years. That is still how every single piece of software is executed on the CPU. But we don't touch it anymore. We have shifted to a higher level, programming intent. And you've seen that several times over the years. C to C++ to Java to Python to, various Go or other higher level programming languages. And this is, I think, just a continuation of that. And so on the software engineering side, if you believe as a software engineer, your job is to write code, that is the machinist of 100 years ago. If you believe that your job is to get a feature to your customers, that is the CNC operator of today. And if you're the former, very, very threatening, right? But that, sorry to say, that's actually been a low value engineer for 25, 30 years. If you're the latter, then the AI tooling is incredibly, incredibly empowering. And all of a sudden, I was talking with some people at one of our offices last week that, what was it? Like, I forget, he was a software engineer, but he was having to go into a language he had literally never touched before. And in the space of 2 or 3 days, he was releasing production grade code that is going out to customers in this other completely different language. Historically, that would simply not have been possible. And so it is both. And I think I know the software engineering and kind of ops and IT space the most. And I think that is where you have probably that biggest dichotomy. But where AI can't really help, legal. There is no, SWE bench for whether or not your legal argument is the right legal argument. The whole bit of law is being able to argue both sides. That's the human element that's not ever going to go away. Maybe ever is the wrong way. Not going to go away for a very, very, very long time. And so, my daughter is in college. She is a CS major in international studies as well. And so it has actually been pretty fascinating talking to her about, what I think she needs to know. What are the core concepts? And it's a mix of make sure you understand systems level thinking And you know what? Yeah, you need to know enough of the syntax to be able to call BS on the implementation when it goes sideways. But that's not a whole lot different than being able to call BS on the compilers back in the day, right? When they went sideways. And I think that's a pretty accurate, I think it's pretty accurate comparison.
Yeah, I love the analogy. The reality today is most jobs today did not exist in the 40s, 50s, post industrial revolution. So things are going to change. I think we all acknowledge that. Dating ourselves, the last time I had to code anything, it was C++, and you'd have to tell me, I don't think there's a lot of those coders around anymore, at least not building anything modern. And I took the microcontroller class in college, and I remember that professor and that textbook. So yeah, but the cool, now I'm vibe coding because it's fun, and I've found some cool use cases that I can solve for, and it's been a long time since I've coded in my career, and I never would have spent the time or energy to figure out, whatever the language is that I want to use, but the tools have made that possible. So I think your take's generally right. I think you got to embrace it and invest in figuring it out. And the ones who don't are unfortunately going to be the ones that get left behind.
Yeah, and I think that willingness to figure it out is, I think, a big part of it. And if you know what you want, now the tools are there to help you, as opposed to, the biggest hurdle previously being, did you have the technical knowledge to pull the syntax out and to get everything to line up and to know how to integrate X and Y, and chasing all of these critically important minutia. And I think it's actually uh, really democratizing software engineering, and app building and that kind of stuff, so that, you know, people who like yourself, who are like, I know what I want, I can describe what I want really well, now can start building and actually building pretty solid solutions.
I'm blown away. I'm so fascinated. Lots of stuff that we all got to figure out, and the world and the economy are going to have to figure out, no doubt. But it's a pretty exciting time. Let me wrap up with a couple questions here. Since we're talking about AI and tooling, and our relationship started because you were trying to solve a problem, and we're looking for some outside help. So I wonder if you can talk about your thought process around deciding build versus buy, but also DIY versus outside help.
Getting experts or external, yeah. And I think that's, you can never outsource ownership or responsibility, and you get out of it what you put into it in that thing. So if you're trying to just go find someone externally and be vague about your ask, that's going to be a pretty tough road to hoe. But I do think that if you have a clarity of intent, then you can have a high quality conversation with whoever that outside party is and be like, okay, I need X. Can you help me with this? Everybody has blind spots. And I think that's, when we've worked together in the past, I think it was incredible to have that external viewpoint to come in, and you're like, I know where I'm going, but I don't know what I don't know. And so being able to have someone come in who's got the domain expertise to help be part of the team and help guide the internal team through it, and avoid a few of the mistakes, hopefully, right? That you just wouldn't know enough to avoid otherwise. I think that's the most powerful thing about it. I mean, obviously there's like, just like, hey, do you need more hands or some other stuff like that? But that's not the high leverage thing in my head. The high leverage is being able to come in and have a highly skilled team that has opinions and be like, I can give you three options. Here's different ways to do it. Here's why I've seen this one work or that one, or, and being able to debate that with the team because they have that external viewpoint. I think that's why I tend to go to outside teams. The outside team is never going to have the domain knowledge that your internal team does, but they're going to have a breadth of experience that your internal team's never going to have. I think that's the big win. Maybe AI related, maybe not AI related. I think it helps to iterate that faster with AI stuff. But I think fundamentally, AI is not going to really give you the nuanced questions. And if you can't ask a good question of the tools will tell you exactly what you want to hear, and they will drive you straight off a cliff.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, there's the reasoning and judgment element that despite the way the models are advancing, somebody's got to make a call at the end of the day. You know, you got option A, B, or C, and the model is going to tell you which one to pick based on how you ask the question, not necessarily the human judgment element. And that's pretty critical.
Yeah, and I can't agree with that enough. I mean, I have started asking it to disprove my questions. And it was because it would always tell me what I wanted to hear, right? Or it presupposed that if I was asking about something, the answer should be yes.
Let me wrap up with a question here. Looking ahead, what are you most excited about or focused on next 12 months?
I am really excited about the team figuring out how to use these tools in a real fashion. And I should preface that by saying we're already releasing code to production. We've already got the majority of the people using them, but it feels like we're maybe stumbling into a crawl about how to effectively use them. And I'm really bullish over the next 12 months that we'll start to figure out as an industry some of the patterns that really work. The models are plateauing, at least in my opinion, to some degree. The tools are not. Our ability to use them is not. And I think as we figure out spec-driven development, agent workflows, I should say, what is like a best practice-ish look like with that? I think that's going to be pretty transformative over the next 6 to 9 months, and then really starting to see that take off. And so that's kind of at an industry level, I think I'm really excited about. You know, I think from a professional standpoint, I think it's going to be really cool. Some of the stuff Arlo's got cooking in the background, and hopefully we'll be getting out, to market here in the next, 6 to 9 months, which probably would have been 12 to 18 previously. And so I think that'll be very cool as well.
Yeah, can't wait to see it. So, Chris, I appreciate you. This has been fun. Tell people where can they find you if they want to track you down.
What's the best way? Probably LinkedIn.
Right on, man. Well, I appreciate you. It's good to see you. Thank you for listening, everybody. This has been Tech Pod Talks. If you enjoyed it, subscribe, like, comment, whatever you do on the socials these days. I'm Steven Koza, and we will see you on the next one.